What is up, everyone, and welcome to episode 79 of the Trainer Scoop. We were 10 off, Dylan. We can't have everything in life. How have you been, man?
I've been good.
I think you're definitely one of the most returning guests of the podcast at this point, being back for the third time. And
Yeah.
honestly, I don't know how you felt because I know you've done your bit of podcasting in the past. At this point, it's kind of hard for me to find good guests that I that provide value. And I just been rotating through a couple of you guys that do really great work. So I feel like even though it's the third time, still tons of good stuff to hit on. Always appreciate you making time for the podcast, man.
Dude, I mean, that means a lot. I think if you feel I provide value, then I take that as a huge compliment. And I'm always happy to be on here with you, man.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you, dude. So we could both go real quick because I feel like we haven't talked a ton in the past couple of months. Every once in a while, we just be DMing back and forth. But tell me what's been up, man. I guess the second half of 2023 and 2024, any cool life events, big things to note, that type of deal?
Not really, man. I traveled a lot more last year, like more than I have ever in my life. That was really cool. Like a lot of business stuff and just meeting up with friends and collaborating and doing all that stuff. So that was really cool. And definitely that required me to be a lot more flexible, which is something that I tried my best to work on throughout last year, especially when I was in a diet. I actually did a lot of the traveling when I was dieting. And I was just really flexible, didn't bring a lot of food with me, ate at gas stations, ate out. And I mean, in that fat loss phase, I lost like 30 pounds. So definitely helped me step away from my dichotomous view of food, and allowed me to learn how to be flexible. And I think that's a skill that, one, I'm trying to instill with my clients, and two, I'm trying to carry into this prep because I just find that the neuroticism itself about like food and where it's coming from and like specific macros, being neurotic about those things probably negates the added benefit it has. So just try my best to be as minimalist as possible. I've had a few trips where I just brought my bag and some protein bars and then, went to a store when I got there, ate out a lot and, still lost weight. So that was a really cool thing. I mean, being as transparent as possible, the end of 2023 was kind of rough. It's like some psychological stuff that I, deal with on and off. I have diagnosed anxiety and depression. So those things, they come in waves, definitely. And, I do my best to get work through them. And I'm on the other side of that. So I'm feeling great now. And I really did focus towards the end of that to kind of get back into my routines. That kind of brought me out of some of them. So really just making sure like starting this prep and just starting the new year, I really got back into like my actual schedule and my routines and rebuilt some of those habits so that it's a little more autonomous now. And that's kind of a big driver of my anxiety. So yeah, no, I'm doing great now. And that's kind of just a brief summary of everything that happened. So
yeah, dude. Well, thank you for letting us know, man. I mean, it's part of life dealing with the struggles. Of course, not everybody has to go through it, but I do appreciate you letting me know and letting everybody know. And, I know we briefly talked back in the DMs back and forth about just like the struggles. And I'm sure they kind of correlated over with like, just like wanting to do content creation and staying driven with that, definitely probably has some added challenge when you're going through those emotions and those times of the year that are really tough. So, dude, I'm glad to hear that you're on the other side of it. That's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you, man.
And it is tough because like you said, like things are very closely tied together, with the neuroticism of bodybuilding and how that could potentially play into anxiety. So I feel like that's just a huge year of growth for you. Like the fact that you were able to travel so much and let go of some of that like neuroticism toward bodybuilding, at least. There's a lot more to life than just this, but
100%. No, I mean, I think that did help me to alleviate a lot of my anxiety. Because a lot of my anxiety was around food before. I remember specific instances in the past where, if my girlfriend and I needed to go somewhere, I was spending most of the day getting prepared, sometimes even cutting into like a vacation or something like that to prepare my food. I would get anxious if I didn't have access to my food or my specific foods. And through like nutrition education, and then also just trying to be more flexible and understanding, the pillars, understanding tracking, all that stuff, it has really helped me. So education is something that actually allowed me to be more free from some of those boundaries that I had set on myself, and some of them instilled from previous coaches, and others just some I've put on myself. I mean, and I think that with bodybuilding, you kind of get this self-selection. Like neurotic people tend to pick bodybuilding, self-select bodybuilding, because of the structure it provides, because of, having a lot of control, right? But it's been something that I've learned is probably not necessary, and probably takes away from my bodybuilding in some regards. Obviously, being adherent is important, and having some control over your food and your environment is important. But there's ways to navigate that don't really take away from your life. They just really require you to be more conscious of your choices and things like that. So, I definitely think it's a huge part of the improvement in my anxiety over time and my enjoyment overall in life and in bodybuilding.
Dude, isn't it so crazy how your just overall enjoyment in life increases when you can start to detach from those really rigid systems?
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah.
No, I mean, and bodybuilding, again, competitive bodybuilding, I think still shouldn't take away from your life. Like, I think most people do it out of, like, nobody does bodybuilding because of the finances or whatever. People do it because they love bodybuilding, right? So why make it so harsh on yourself when it doesn't need to be, when that doesn't necessarily affect the outcome, and when that just strips your enjoyment from it? Like, I just didn't see the rationale there. So yeah.
Dude, it's really important to talk about, like, you don't have to be a hermit. You don't have to like isolate yourself. That's like the hardest lesson I feel like. Is it the hardest lesson? It's top two hardest lessons I've
It's a
learned.
hard,
Yeah. Lost out on relationships, lost out on like so much money over the years. Man, just experiences in general. But I mean, would I do it over again? I don't know.
Yeah. Lessons learned. I mean, you can definitely look at bodybuilders who lived like that and look at their careers after bodybuilding, and they're always kind of just scraping by. Like, they're jumping from sponsor to sponsor. They don't have a lot to show for their time, and a lot of them are just unhappy. And I can see it with even bodybuilders today, who are just fucking miserable. And it's like, dude, what are you doing? Like, I don't know. You create that environment, and um, it, it's funny when people say it's out of necessity. And I think John Meadows was someone who was actually, like, really making an impact by saying this, like, because he had such strong, like, family values and stuff. And a lot of people were kind of turning, and listening to him. And I kind of just also, I mean, even just speaking about it here, I think, and I try to post about it and talk about it a lot, is just bringing some light to that, because I think it's something that is a little outdated as far as, like, practices in bodybuilding.
Yeah. Did you ever get heavily into the John Meadows programs? Like, there was a couple where real old school, like, he would just document everything he did and sell it as an ebook program.
No, I did a lot of those because I was training under my first, like, real coach. I mean, I had a coach for my first show, but my first real coach was one of John Meadows' coaches. And John, I didn't work with John, and he was like, if you work with my head coach, I'll send you, we'll give you programs for free. So I did a bunch of them. I did, like, his Arnold Classic, and
Yeah.
I can't remember some of the names of the other ones, but those were really fun.
Yeah, and I mean, he really did, like, document things pretty well. And most of the time, I felt like he was always just like, Sunday is like rest from training. It's family day.
Yeah,
Like,
family meal, cheat meal. Yeah, he would
Yeah.
always put that in there. Yeah,
Yeah. And I mean,
and he was adamant about doing that during prep too.
yeah,
It's
I
like
saw.
always making time for his family.
Yeah, I saw that in YouTube videos way back in the day. And
Yeah,
also another bodybuilder that we heard. I mean, a lot of like, if we're talking like mainstream bodybuilding, like the Matt Jansen clients seem to prep through like an off meal with all the way through prep, or a lot of the way through prep, which is pretty cool. Like,
yeah, definitely. I think, and again, I think you see some of the old school guys still preaching some of that other stuff, being hardcore all the time, and I just think it's just kind of on the way out. So the more coaches that do that, the more we'll see a change. But yeah, I do think that it's kind of outdated to be really rigid.
Yeah, man. Yeah. That's a great way to start off the podcast. Those are just like important things to let people know. Especially for like, I feel like the age range that listens to my podcast, they're like a little bit younger people that I've kind of like
Yeah.
mentored in the past. And
I
it's good,
mean, shit,
to
like
hear.
when I first started bodybuilding, I was very much like that. I mean, I also like had other shit, like I just didn't feel like I fit in. And a lot of my friends, you know, a lot of people thought like bodybuilding was weird. I mean, I started bodybuilding when I was really young, so I was like 12 or 13, right? So uh I definitely at some point I do think that it was somewhat detrimental, but I think that I also, yeah, was like very much like one track, like this is what I'm doing. I was willing to take risks that I again wouldn't have taken. I think I said this on your podcast before. I was willing to take risks that I wouldn't have taken now. And yeah, I was just like, yeah, very isolated myself to be able to do this. And that was where a lot of that dichotomy had come from. And that was from probably watching a lot of bodybuilders and you know, listening to a lot of people who are more neurotic, and then just having that also like confirm, you know, my biases and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, I feel like I've come a long way from that, and it's somewhere I've evolved. So it is something that I try to be vocal about and also try to preach to clients. So I think it's something that's important to talk about.
Dude, 100%. Dylan and I were talking before I pressed record about a recent YouTube video that he's uploaded. And really like 40 minutes of, even though, you know, I feel like some people might look at that and be like, oh, 40 minutes of just his plans. There's so much you can extrapolate and take away, like what variables to track. Honestly, you kind of gave a major cheat code to people to the point where they could like develop some damn good protocols for themselves with that video. And it was just like a kind of like your yearly plan, correct? That was like the main premise.
Somewhat, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't map out everything as I have in the past, but yeah, for the most part, it's like this is what the year is going to look like, at least the coming mesocycle and what I plan moving forward. Yeah.
Yeah. So video was fire. I'll link it. Go ahead and check it out. But like do like a control open in another tab so you can come back to the podcast. I'm interested to hear because you talked briefly about your farm. How did that compare to the first show that you did? What you were like, it was like what, like 18, 19 years old when you did like your first show?
Yeah.
Yeah. Was it like
Yeah.
drastically different protocols there?
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, I didn't really know what I was doing then. And I didn't really learn what I was doing with farm until like probably 2017, 2018. Not even like, no, more like 2020 actually. As far as like where I'm at now and the safer use models and being a little bit smarter, but also, you know, just getting more out of it. But yeah, I mean, I started taking, I think, so that was like my second cycle ever, I believe was my contest prep cycle, maybe third,
Mhm.
because I started young, right? Like I started at like 17, and I
Mhm.
did like the typical like, you know, blast PCT model, because at that point I still thought PCT was valuable, and then eventually I learned to just kind of blast and cruise. But yeah, I think I started at 500 milligrams a test and just ran that through, and then I did that again, I believe, and then I had, yeah, that must have been what I did. It's hard because it's been so long. And then yeah, I think I ran low dose test, Masteron, and Trend for that show, totaling somewhere around 700 milligrams total, I want to say. I remember I had a friend at the time who wasn't a bodybuilder, but like loved bodybuilding and like studied all the forums and stuff. So he like, we like met together and he like helped me plan out a cycle and here are the compounds, here are the trade-offs. He was already kind of doing this analysis of like risk management and like what is it taking, you know. In retrospect, I wouldn't have taken Trend, but you know, it is what it is.
You started off pretty reasonable. I'm like, okay. And then it goes trend. I'm like, oh.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's still, there was a conversation about that.
Yeah.
And in my mind, it was like, I'm gonna be the best. I'm gonna be you know, team bodybuilder, blah blah blah. Like this is, you know, I'm willing to take whatever risks is associated with that. And I mean, I thought I looked decent. I definitely could have been better conditioned at that show, um, in retrospect. But yeah, so I mean, if you look at that, obviously that's like miles different from what I do now. I definitely had Trend way higher, and there's so many other compounds I use now. I do think like I've always been somewhat smart about my like total dosage and exposure. except for when I had a coach who I think was a little more risky with that. So I've been generally pretty conservative, and ultimately I've built up to the dosage that I'm at. Like right now I'm starting at 1 gram. I'll probably end around 2 grams. And that's years of like slowly tapering up dosage, like 250 milligrams, every exposure, right? And watching my health as that's occurred, and not seeing anything that was like a red flag. So yeah, it's definitely like obviously a lot more, but I'm also a lot bigger, have a lot more muscle mass. And then I'm also using a lot more polypharmacy, like as far as using different compounds, which you may have seen on that. I have GH and at play. I have, mostly not a too diverse selection of androgens. Just testing Masteron right now. I have L-carnitine. I have T4, leveraging, like I'm using semaglutide as well. So definitely a lot more polypharmacy, but I think it generally allows me to be a little bit smarter about the approach and pull on these different strings that allow me to not bombard a certain system, not run my androgens super high. I can run a little bit of GH or a little bit of, testosterone, a little bit of L-carnitine or whatever, and get this kind of synergy effect out of all of them. So yeah, that's that's kind of one of the main things is polypharmacy, being smart, looking at my blood work and making some decisions off of that.
Yeah, that's really cool, man. Like that evolution is big because like you said, when you have the better education, when the polypharmacy approach, dude, I feel like you're cutting down your risk so much, but still able to get quite a bit out of your efforts, we'll call them.
100%. Yeah, I think like I have a post about this when I worked with Jared. There's a couple times where this occurred where there was like a period of a couple of years where I just didn't touch my dosage at all. So I had worked with the coach. I've talked about on your podcast before where I had this bad experience with a coach who kind of had me run a lot of drugs, and I just didn't think he knew what he was doing, especially in retrospect after I learned a lot more. But then I worked with Stan Efferding and Flex Wheeler, and they had me at around like 1 gram, 1.2 grams of gear. And I actually didn't change that dosage from like 2019 all the way until like 2021 or so, like way into working with Jared. And I just grew the whole time. And it was like Stan had introduced me into like more evidence-based lifting. So like, using RIR, training with volume, increasing the frequency, fatigue management, all this stuff like Stan had taught me. And I just got like a growth of explosion of growth, from that. And he started using some polypharmacy with me as well and showing me how to do that. Is showing me studies, all this stuff. So that was super cool. And then, fast forward, I do my own thing for a little bit, and then I work with Jared, and now he improves my training even more. And I get the same exact thing where I just kind of just recomp and just keep growing. So yeah, I just didn't have to touch it for as long as I needed. I just kept growing from improving my training and stuff like that. So that it was, very eye-opening to me, where it was like, I'm getting so much out of this input that I don't need to change it. And I didn't really touch much else. And then eventually I started to notice that I wasn't getting the same response. And there's been a couple learning experiences from that, but yeah. And then I started to slowly creep the dosage up after that. But yeah, it was like some novelty effect from just improving the training was a huge one, improving the nutrition a little bit, getting a CPAP. A lot of that stuff had happened over that timeline. And then again, with working with Jared, where he improved my training so much that I had this even greater explosion of growth. So yeah, that was huge. That was a very eye-opening thing for me. So where now when I work with clients, like, just knowing that like it's not always it is about the total dosage for sure. Like that is an important factor. And that is especially where I'm at currently after I've optimized all these things. Yes, like total dosage is definitely the thing that makes you bigger. Like, and I think I've spent some time kind of like, not being as realistic with myself about that. So where it's made me have to make some different decisions and maneuver a little bit differently. But like, I think people underestimate how much they can get out of training and nutrition and sleep. And so they're just upping the dosage. I ultimately think that you should probably, in retrospect, have a coach that you trust that can help you optimize those things before you even touch gear. I'm very grateful when I get someone who hasn't even touched gear first. We can optimize everything first, look at their blood work, get baseline, and then improve from there. But, it's just the fact that I didn't even have to increase the dosage and just kept running that and kept growing goes to show that it's not just about that, and there's other things that are to be had from improving. And then the polypharmacy, right? And then I started experimenting with that more. And that's something that even with earlier on PED users, I deploy a little bit more. Like I used to be, I don't know why I had friends, we used to make these like rules, like we're never going to touch this, we're never going to touch that. And then in retrospect, I mean, I see bodybuilders now, it's actually really funny. They brag about like, I saw Phil Heath in an interview. He was like on Chris Williamson or something. He's like, I never touched insulin. I'm like, dude, that's just idiotic, honestly. Like,
it's like, why would you not?
Exactly, 100%. Like when you actually know what insulin's doing, you're like,
of all the compounds.
Yeah, because people associate
compound.
General public associates insulin with like, especially in like bodybuilding, or the rumors in bodybuilding, it's going to cause you to die. Well, when used appropriately, it actually helps protect your pancreas. It helps keep your blood glucose in check. Like it has all these protective effects, and then also maybe some synergy with muscle building. It's like, why would you not use that thing? And then you notice like a lot of bodybuilders are diabetic now. Like a lot of bodybuilders are have type 2 diabetes. And I imagine that in part is due to the fact that they're running high dose growth hormone and running their blood glucose high all the time, stressing out their pancreas and not using insulin. So it's like, stuff like that where you're like, this is kind of like, it actually just makes more sense to use polypharmacy because of the less burdensome it is on your system. It allows you to build more muscle. Like, it's really silly in retrospect, especially when people are kind of foo-fooing it. But yeah, I even with earlier on clients, I might have them implement a low dose GH before I say increase their testosterone or their androgens up to a certain amount, and then we'll use a little bit of L-carnitine, we'll use a little bit of this, and just keep pulling these other levers, and then add a little bit here, add a little bit here, instead of just androgens through the roof, and they get a ton of side effects. So
yeah, dude, I'm not gonna lie, when you were talking in your video, I hadn't heard the GH thing like that early in kind of like the standard, like what I've learned from like Joe Jeffries and like, the safer use. I hadn't heard that before because I haven't been super investigative lately. But then you said that, and then I did some more like looking into just a couple of different like articles on the Physique Collective, and I was like, oh, okay, this does actually make sense. But when you said that, I was a little surprised. I'm glad that you brought that up, just because, I mean, I don't know, but I feel like a lot of people wouldn't think to like add in GH. It kind of has that connotation to it, right?
That, like I was saying with like my friends, we have these compounds. I'm not going to touch Clen, I'm not going to touch GH, but blah blah blah. And it's like, yeah, I mean, like for example, what did you hear about GH? Sorry, it's working.
No, you're good. Is that your dog?
Yeah.
Is it right out of the door?
Yeah.
You should have brought him on, bro. I fucking love that dog. It's cute as hell.
Look up. Come here.
I saw a picture of that dog recently. I'm like, damn, that's a cute ass dog. You have 2 dogs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Get them both.
He's freaking out because his mom came home.
Oh my, so cute. Absolutely adorable.
Yeah, he's also a menace.
Oh, both are hi. Wow, this is such a treat.
Hi.
This is such a treat.
Yeah.
This is the best
Navi,
podcast yet.
And this is Luca.
They're adorable.
They are.
Now we just got to get the spiders in here. The snakes.
You got some right here, actually.
I'm so sorry. What's your girlfriend's name again?
Maddie.
Yes, Maddie is just a exotic creature.
Yeah, this is all spider enclosures.
Yeah, that's just crazy. Follow Maddie on Instagram, people. I'm gonna have to do that
if you want to buy a jumping spider as a pet.
The jumping spider content was fire. I don't even know if she posts much, but I used to see it, now I don't. But I think she should start.
He's saying you should post more on your jumping spider Instagram.
I know, I never post anymore.
Yeah, she was breeding them, so she was selling them.
I sell them to pet stores usually. So
yeah,
that's wild. I was there for the spider content.
Yeah, let me know if you ever want a pet spider and can hook it up.
Send it. We need a gym spider. What do you think about that?
That'd be cool. Have like a pet spider. Get like a funny name for it. That'd be awesome.
And people just like they'll like sprinkle PEDs into the spider.
Yeah, have you seen the study where they give the spider different drugs and like how it affects the web?
Oh, yeah. It's like LSD and stuff.
Yeah.
That shit's crazy.
Let's give it some trends, see what it does.
Dude, this spider just like he's just like writing manifestos in the web, like how he's gonna conquer the world.
I just imagine him like in the web, like with his front legs just like this at everybody.
Front
They
double
do
bicep.
they do like a threat pose when they're gonna strike, so they put their arms up like this.
Just slabs and slabs of muscle on that spider.
That'd be so funny.
I can't remember where we were. That's the thing.
Yeah, so I was asking you what you had heard about GH and what perspective, like, because you mentioned that your perspective changed on it.
Yeah, just that more negative connotation, like it's a more serious compound, like a little bit more risk involved. You should, work your way up into that.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, that's what I had heard too, right? And then you do some digging and, you realize that that's not the case. And, again, like it is in general, like all these compounds have risks that's associated with them, but like you can do the proper health monitoring to ensure that they're not affecting, because the thing is there's also inter-individual response, right? So it's like maybe GH for you affects your health negatively. Like I have clients that'll put on GH and they just immediately get like high blood glucose, and it affects their fasting glucose immediately, like and their insulin sensitivity. So it's like, there's a genetic response, and right. So paying attention to these things and having the health monitoring tools. Again, another one's like water retention. Like a lot of people, blood pressure will go up. So there's things that you have to be mindful of for sure when taking these things. But in a well-designed program, given that you have a on average response, this thing could really be beneficial for your muscle growth, and then allow you to not bombard your system with one drug that's stimulating one pathway that has a lot of negative downstream effects, right? So yeah, I think that it and the thing is too is like with the anecdotes with bodybuilders, like I mean, I've talked to so many bodybuilders. There's like, if you look at the data on GH, it's like very limited in like its ability to grow muscle tissue. Like in some of the studies, it's like water retention what people get, right? But then you just look at the anecdote and then you talk to enough people and you're like, yeah, GH is like what morphed my physique. Like high dose GH made me look, like another person, like blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, yeah, okay. So like there's some utility to it. Like as far as like maybe not running your androgens like crazy, but having a good amount of GH in place if you can afford it too. So obviously budget is a concern there too. But yeah, so definitely like there are definitely riskier compounds, but GH also falls within when talking about safer use models. It falls within it's a bioidentical hormone, right? It is something that is produced in your body naturally, right? Your body doesn't produce tren naturally, so there's that, right? So it's like, okay, well, when we're looking at compound selection, we want to pick hormones that are generally naturally occurring in the body. Generally, they have less side effects when you're taking them, even at relatively high doses. They're tolerated much better. So the models that I work with mostly function with bioidentical hormones. You run those up as much as you can, knowing your body's going to tolerate them well. And then when you generally start to experience side effects, you put in something else that's maybe synthetic. I mean, I guess they're all synthetic, but something that like a Masteron or something like that. And again, the way these compounds are selected, why we're putting them in, is because they have either have a lot of data in humans, have been deployed clinically, or they had low side effect profiles at high doses. For example, like the reason why I use a lot of primobolan is there's a few studies, and there's one in particular where they give females like 1,200 milligrams of primo a week, and they got viralization, like they got masculine side effects, like as far as like voice deepening, facial hair, all that stuff. But they didn't have a lot of like actual side effects as far as like health compromise. So it's like, okay, well, if we're picking drugs that we're gonna just use a lot of to get the effect of muscle growth, when we know that like maybe in this 1,200 milligram range of primobolan, like there was very low side effects. So but we know at low doses of tren we get a ton of side effects. So it's like, well, what should we pick? On average, we should probably pick primobolan, right? So yeah, that's kind of like, as far as, again, it came with a lot of education. It came with learning about these compounds. Education is one of the things that helps you with your fear of certain things, right? And allows you to sift through a lot of the bullshit that persists out there.
Yeah. Yo, I'll tell you what, that was fire, because I've consulted back and forth with Dylan over 2023 because I was trying to learn a little bit more about PEDs just to really make sure some of the homies. I don't even really say that I would ever make recommendations, but I just want to say like, hey, this is what seems to be kosher. So like, I'm not telling you what to do, and you're going to do what you want to do, but this is what, you know, I would guide you to do if I possibly could lend you advice. So I was, you know, consulting back and forth with Dylan. I was reading a lot of articles, reading a lot of research, also stumbled upon the Physique Collective. And I feel like what you just stated in probably the last 10 minutes took me hours and hours and hours, maybe multiple days to find. And I'm sure, you know, like you lived it, so that there's that added, like, you know, you lived it, you did the shit, you suffered some of the negative consequences. So like, just really, really appreciate you breaking that down. Cause I mean, that's a great little blueprint for people that are maybe going to dip their toe in regardless, allegedly.
Yeah. It's tough because it's like when you say like, oh yeah, only use bioidentical hormones. It's like, okay, what are those, right? So it's like, and then like, oh, they're the hormones that naturally occur in the body. It's like, okay, well, what are those? You know, so it's like it definitely takes some prerequisite education. That's also a reason why you shouldn't be dabbling with this if you don't know this or you don't have a coach to guide you through it, because as it can be complicated, and it's also like there are a lot of things that I would have done differently if I had started, you know, later and or at least had the guidance that I needed earlier on, right? Because a lot of this stuff can be tricky. There's a lot of like I think when I was talking to Steve, I don't know if it was like a podcast we did or something, but he was talking about like one of the reasons why he likes being natural, and it's like there's so much less like variables to juggle, right? I find it relatively simple now that I have the prerequisite knowledge, but like still, like if you don't, like fluid dynamics are different. There's blood pressure. There's interpreting blood work. There's there's, you know, how to get a heart scan, how to interpret that heart scan, how to do this, how to that. There's so many things that come along with it. So it can be very complicated actually. So yeah, no, I think that's reason to, you know, in your case, like you can consult with me, you know, and these people who are choosing to take that, you know, that make that decision, like, yeah, making sure you have either studied this extensively or hire someone who has, because of how many things that, you know, how many variables are up in the air.
Yeah, dude. It's like a more money, more problems type scenario, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, people want the muscle growth, but they don't want all the stuff that comes along with you know, with PEDs.
Right. But for real, dude,
they'll just turn the cheek to all of it. Yeah.
Dude, I'm glad that there's like good coaches like you out there, because just it's still shocking how many people are fucking reckless with it. So
dude, I got exposed to it more when I became a coach, because then you start getting people coming to you who have worked with these coaches, and the amount of consultations I have where I'm just like it's almost like it's fearful for the fact that these coaches are out there still helping people. Like I hear some of the stuff they do, and I'm like, man, I mean, there's so many thoughts that go through my head, like, but yeah, ultimately, like a lot of these coaches are actually harming people, and they've just never done the prerequisite, you know, research, don't have the prerequisite knowledge. They were probably some guy who worked out, did a few shows, and became a coach. Yeah, so it's I have so many people that come across, and the reason why I started in the first place coaching is just because I was like, I want to be that person that at least helps a few people step away from some of these bad coaches, and you know, guides them the right way, and helps and helps reduce harm in the industry. So yeah, I think that was a really big reason why I got into it in the first place. But yeah, no, it still persists, and unfortunately, a lot of these people have large followings, and you know, people come to them for coaching, and sometimes are harmed as a result.
Yeah, I remember a couple actually funny like farm related things that like we grazed on in the team full ROM. I remember one time there was the discussion around that article that was released. It was like a mainstream article about a bodybuilder dying, and then it just kind of like was like a deep dive on, not a deep dive, of course, it was pretty surface level, but like almost like attack on like the way that coaching goes down in bodybuilding. They're like, yeah, like people are kind of, you know, not responsible, but maybe like it could be held liable for like death. And yeah, there's just like a lot of craziness.
Well, they aren't,
that.
unfortunately. They
Yeah.
should be. I mean, there's coaches out there who have confirmed deaths that are still coaching, and people just forget about it. Like, you know, cancer culture, like it doesn't, I mean, I don't know. It seems like some people just, they just continue on and they do their thing, and they don't, you know, there's a little bit of publicity around them for a little bit, and then people just forget about it. So I think like I'm still very aware that that person killed people. I'll say it right now. Shelby Starnes is confirmed killed people before, and people still back him up. People still work with him. He has people on record saying they had ridiculous protocols working under him, and you know, people still work with him. Unfortunately, they defend him to the, you know, end of time. So, you know, it's unfortunate these people are still in our industry, but our industry doesn't have like a regulatory body, and it's mostly just word of mouth. So I think the more we can openly talk about that stuff that's occurring, the better, and the more we can talk openly about PED usage and the negative side effects, and put out more positive information, you know, the better. So that's, I guess, where I try to exist in some degree.
Yeah, it's the best place to be. Another funny Full ROM Farm interaction, because they try not to talk about, for all my listeners, they try not to talk about pharmacology in like public forums on Facebook where records can be taken. But I remember one time I was just like asking the group, like, how do you go about learning? And someone was like, you should really acquaint yourself with like undergraduate level pharmacology before you.
Oh yeah, I remember this.
And I was like reading into these textbooks. I'm like, and I like illegally downloaded a few of them. I'm like, oh fuck, like I'm not gonna read this. Like I'm gonna have to find a way that this is like communicated. But like,
yeah,
this is so dead.
I mean, my education is much so like that. Like I basically worked more so on the front end of like the practical, and then worked back on the mechanisms if I needed it. Because like, you know, I don't know, having some of the mechanistic knowledge sometimes helps. Sometimes it can get you too much into the weeds, and you see some of these people who are very, very smart who kind of get caught up in like mechanisms and instead of outcomes. There's a few coaches out there that do that now, so it's like who are very, very smart, and it's almost a detriment where they're focusing on these like little interactions or some of these studies where something that I don't know, it's a mechanism of taking place, but it doesn't actually affect the outcome of, you know, X steroid or whatever. So I think there's you know, some practical people to learn from. I took J3. It was very much like, this is what you need to know. Like, this is fucking with chemistry, fucking with biology. Like, there's definitely some prerequisite, like some things, some basic stuff you need to know to be able to understand some of that stuff. But from like a coaching perspective, even like, I think that some of that stuff, you know, it isn't always relevant or super useful. And as far as my practice, again, I've kind of like basically worked on the front end. You know, what do I need to know to help this person? What do I need to know to help myself to grow muscle? And then if I needed to understand a mechanism, something, then I would go back, reference one of those textbooks or whatever.
One thing I've always really respected about you, and I think it's so cool. I remember when I first like came across your content and started to like learn more about Dylan's story. And I was like, how is this motherfucker so smart and he didn't go to school for it? Because like there was a lot of, like, I'd say the first type of people that I went to school with that are like super knowledgeable, like were the research nerds, like did take everything to that level, not just like learning about farm, but like everything within exercise science. And to me, that's what like a really intelligent, like well thought, well spoke individual was, is like you had that background. But then I was like, damn, Dylan just shows that you can do it without going down that route, and just like all the education you've done for yourself. I mean, you've definitely invested time and money, but you don't have to have that like formal college background, especially with all these good resources.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think one, I personally was just someone who just didn't mesh well with school. Like, it was something that I always had a trouble with. I think like when I went to go to college, I had a few professors where I was like, man, I would ask questions and they wouldn't have like the responses I'd get were kind of disappointing or like, you know, sometimes just misleading. And I just like kind of just didn't buy into it. And that's nothing on education. Like there's great professors out there. But it was just a couple times I tried and had these poor experiences, and that turned me away personally. And then I basically just like was like, okay, well, there's no bodybuilding degree, so should I go to school for this, or should I? Ultimately, what I decided was like, there are a few people out here who have these educations that are putting out information, and they're putting out the more practical stuff. So like stuff I would need to I would need to go to school all the way to a PhD to learn. Right, they're learn some of the stuff that the value that they're putting out at low price points. I was like, I can just learn from these people, and you know, not get the same education, but get like a decent understanding of these things so that I can help people. And so, yeah, I just kept like looking at the people who were kind of agreeing with the consensus of things, who I thought were on average pretty accurate. I would just read their books and take their courses. And, you know, for a lot lower than a degree as far as like cost, I was able to get a pretty decent education, I would say. Again, it's nothing on college. I just think that with the amount of information that's available on the internet, if you know where to look, know who to go to, you have someone you trust who maybe has a higher level education, you can learn a ton. I mean, like, for example, like RP, like their YouTube, if you were to be able to take every video on their YouTube, upload that in your brain, you'd have the knowledge of Mike and everybody else who works there, you know, from their education, all the practical stuff about how to, you know, change your body composition, how to be healthy, how to grow muscle, like, you know, and this is just all just either free or very, very low cost. All of these different podcasts they come on. So if you just consume all of that, like you can take in a lot.
Yeah, it wasn't until tens of thousands of dollars and years of time into Ohio State did I get to the level of information that I actually found
It takes
like
time, right?
enjoyable. Yeah. I wish honestly I wouldn't have had to fuck around with those general chemistry classes, and I could have kind of expedited it.
That's the biggest hurdle, because I still toy with the idea here and there, like,
Yeah.
should I go to school? But then it's like, okay, well, I would probably want to do dietetics or get a PhD, and I'm just like, I don't even know if I even want to fuck with the lower level stuff, because I would have to literally go through all my prerequisites, English, chemistry, all that stuff before I could even get to, you know, and it would be a lot of like biting my teeth, you know, just not putting up with a lot of stuff to get to there. But
you know who should get their opinion?
Who?
Max Strozny, the fucking Mr. Academia himself.
I talked to him. We were talking about the pros and cons of continuing his degree.
Oh yeah, what'd you say?
I was originally saying that he shouldn't continue, but then I realized he had such little time left. I was like, oh yeah, you probably should.
Dude, I told him, I said, bro, get that fucking bag. Fuck school. But I didn't also know that.
That was my first thought. But yeah, I was like trying to take in as much information as I could on the situation. Also, like, I'm very biased because I didn't go to school, so you know, but I think that it is appropriate for some people. And there's parts of me that I wish I went to school. Like if someone has the, you know, the patience and wants to go through that, you know, in the grand scheme of things, it is not a huge part of your life, and the payoff is often, you know, the credentials that you get with it, and the kind of credibility you get that comes along with it is definitely something, right? So I try not to foo-foo it too much. Like, it is valuable, and I'm learning essentially from those people, so I'm grateful they went to school, you know.
You got that street knowledge, that street education, Dylan.
That one thing I do want to say, actually, though, is I actually have paused my education outside of, like, I'm not saying like I paused like learning stuff, but like I paused my education in like the sports science somewhat. Like I'm still staying up to date on like the scientific consensus, and I still watch videos and we'll look at a study or two here and there. But I almost have actively been taking some course throughout my whole body, like from the last couple of years. I'm like always in some course or doing something, right? But I actually also started to learn recently how much like the knowledge is very useful to a point. Like at some point you just need to work with a lot of people The experience is huge as far as working with people, as far as like becoming a better coach and bodybuilder, because you start to collect data. It's obviously anecdotal, but there's also areas where the research lacks, and there's also individual response. So there's a lot that you learn from collecting data on clients and working with a large population of people. Also, psychology is probably a much bigger aspect of coaching than is knowing basic nutrition science and stuff like that. Obviously, it's important, but coaching is much less about the numbers and the specifics as it is more about psychology and adherence, right? You could give anybody like a just decent plan, copy and paste it off the internet, and if they adhere to it for a long period of time, they will get results, right? But the problem is that adherence isn't it's not like flipping a switch. Adherence is something that is challenging. And so that is why a lot of people hire coaches, and getting someone to adhere. Obviously, there is definitely value in learning psychology as well, but there is also value in just working with a large volume of people. So I actually have, I just basically was like, not that I paused it. I actually took some time to do more like business and sales stuff, because I always felt like, oh, if I'm not learning more about sports science or hypertrophy or whatever, that my clients are gonna like, I'm gonna fail them. And it's like, no, like actually just keep working with your clients. I actually started talking to them more, like getting on more calls with them, and I was able to kind of like actually just realize like the more I put into that, the better of a coach I became. So there's definitely just a lot of value to just working with people.
Yeah, very, very, very true. And I feel like when you're constantly trying to challenge yourself, like I do definitely respect that you were always in a course. I remember you telling me in the past, like you're doing this, you're doing this. I'm like, damn, you are staying with it, my man. So like tons of respect to the dedication there. But at a certain point, like you said, there's just like you can like the knowledge that you have, it could be infinite, but like so little of that actually would apply to the coach. Um, I have a really good example of this, and I'm interested to hear your take. So I'm not sure if you would have come by Bryce Calvin on Instagram. He does like progressive performance. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. You probably, I mean, maybe you've seen me repost his shit because like I worked with them for a bit, and like you said, like honestly, he's a super well educated, super science based guy. I think Dr. Mike might have reposted him. You might have seen it there too.
Yeah, I follow.
Yeah, yeah. So I think, lately we've had so much progress on understanding like the importance of training in lengthened positions. So his niche is like bikini girls. So the hip thrust has come under fire because it is like a more shortened type of movement. But he still like swears by them. He's like, yes, I know this doesn't necessarily support what science is telling us, how like a deep lunge or like a deep squat might be better for glute development, but he's like, I just think that this still has a place. And it's very interesting to me. I don't know if there's a right or wrong, but interested to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I'd look and see if this person has any like incentive as far as like they have anything invested in the hip thrust.
True.
Like for example, Brett Contreras has a lot invested in the hip thrust. So like
yeah,
he
yeah.
says the hip thrust is the best exercise, and there's a lot of data to contradict that. I'm very skeptical. Now that's not being said. That's not to say that the hip thrust doesn't have value in a well balanced program. Like I don't think we just because lengthened work is showing to be greater than full range of motion. A lot of these studies that full range of motion has no value, or having a movement that maybe is the loading is preferential towards the shortened range is like problematic per se, but it's not something that should be making up the entirety of your program. And we should and the hierarchy of exercise, if we could start to form a hierarchy, it's definitely going to be lower than something that trains the glutes in a stretch position, right? So yeah, I don't know. I mean, it depends, because like some people will die on a certain hill, right? Especially if they've been advising their clients to do hip thrusts or something for a long period of time, you get some research that starts to contradict that, and they get what's called man, what is the term?
I
It's the
have
friction when you couldn't
bias, but I don't think what I'm thinking is right.
It's no, it's cognitive dissonance.
Yeah,
Where
okay.
you can't hold two contradicting beliefs at the same time. So either you change your beliefs or you double down on your pre-existing beliefs, right? And especially if you're maybe afraid of exposing, and I'm not saying this is what Bryce is doing, it's some coaches and people put out information do this, is that you double down on your beliefs, especially if you've been advising people to do this thing, or it's a big part of your training identity or a big part of your programming, or you don't want to be wrong, which you would just persist in being wrong if you continue to do something like that. But so to double down when you have a lot of research or a lot of something contradicting that belief, it's much more uncomfortable to change your opinion and then also publicly admit that you're wrong. So there's that. And then the fact that I think there are still, like I mentioned, there's still value in some of these movements. Like I think that there are some movements, and I don't do a lot of hip thrusts, but like I do put them in programs. But there are some movements that maybe don't have the best loading profile on paper, aren't lengthened biased. For example, I was just talking with a friend about this today. Is like full ROM laterals for me are an amazing variation. I got a crazy amount of pump and disruption in my shoulders, and they burn like crazy. So but then there's also people who start to argue against those as proxies for muscle growth. And I just think that, there's this whole rabbit hole you can go down, but we just have these proxies that are very consistent that show up when a sufficient stimulus is being provided. When all of the other boxes that we know, when all the other boxes that we know, that we can check for muscle growth, training with 5 to 30 repetitions, close to failure, sufficient volume, blah blah blah. When all those boxes are checked, there's just these proxies that tend to show up, right? That with when you're getting a sufficient growth stimulus, decent technique, all this stuff, you're getting a good pump, you're getting some sort of disruption or cramping in the muscle, right? Or performance loss, you're getting some soreness, like to discount those, I'm kind of waiting for more research to come out to say that they're, for sure not contributing, because there's obviously something there from an anecdotal perspective. And that's another one where listening to like clients in anecdote enough, and even looking at, bodybuilders anecdote and stuff like that, there's definitely still something there. So yeah, all that being said, there's a lot of reasons why someone would maybe be promoting one of these exercises. It could still actually be a great exercise for certain individuals. Maybe there's some cognitive dissonance occurring, and I think there's still utility in using some of these in your program, not throwing them out completely. There's definitely, like, again, there's a hierarchy, right? So it's like there's definitely exercises that are down here that just like there's probably some never use exercises. Like, I mean, I don't think there's any value.
That was crazy.
I don't think there's. Oh, it does. It pops up if you do a thumbs up.
There we go.
Yeah.
Wait, what does it do if we?
I was gonna say that's the next one. No,
just throw up the blood side.
not PC enough. There's definitely hierarchy. There's like what's it called? Jefferson squats. Like, I don't think I would ever put that in a program. That exercise is just
Jefferson.
It's wait, like you grab it, you stand over a barbell and you
split leg.
Yeah, and then you grab it in between your legs.
Oh yeah.
Terrible range of motion. Yeah.
I'm like, dude, what the fuck?
Just do a sumo deadlift. Yeah. Terrible range of motion, awkward to set up. SFR is probably terrible. So it's like, yeah, that's very here. Hip thrusts are above that, right? It's going to be a short and biased movement, not a lot of stretch. And then obviously you have, like, I don't know, sumo squat up here for like glutes or like some lunge variation, right?
Yeah, to me, man, it's just like, it almost just makes sense to me that, like, it's not black and white. That's always just,
no, never is.
It's always the mindset I've had. I'm like, well, that makes sense. Like, it still is probably good, but like, I mean, honestly, on a practical level, am I getting more out of hip thrusts or like a elevated split squat on the Smith machine? Like, that will fuck me up, like,
right,
insanely. And a hip thrust,
yeah, it's not the main exercise you're doing in your program. There are definitely coaches who do that. Then I mean, I think it still has some utility. It's an accessory movement, maybe not as fatiguing. this is something that I learned when I was working with Trevor. I really liked his approach to this. When he would do a higher frequency, he would put a shortened bias movement or something that maybe was a little bit more shortened bias in between, so that the muscle could actually somewhat recover, but still get another stimulative session. So like you're not going to get a lot of soreness or a lot of disruption or even pump or anything crazy from a shortened bias movement, but maybe in a high frequency program that has some context to allow some recovery in between. So there's definitely application for these exercises.
Yeah, I like the way that Trevor thinks about those things. He very like stressed the importance when I was asking him questions once of like how it holistically fits into a mesocycle, like the exercise selection, whether it's in a lengthened position, whether it's in a maybe range or shorten,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and over time, I've started to bias more and more lengthened stuff, especially as my gym has gotten more of like prime stuff and stuff I can change the loading on.
Your gym's been popping off, man. I saw the post.
Insane.
You got some cool equipment coming. Well, and you have some. You said you might get that Atlantis hack squat. That'd be nuts.
Yeah, it's going to be a minute. Unfortunately, some of the pieces take forever. Those prime pieces, I think he ordered a year ago. So
50-week lead time.
Insane. But yeah, no, he's expanded. He has opened another expansion of the gym, which is like a leg day only. I mean, it's not like only, but it's a leg day expansion. So yeah, then I've had more access to that equipment. I'm experimenting with more length and bias training and just seeing the stimulus, but I still throw in, some shortened stuff and some stuff that maybe on paper wouldn't be the best exercise, but for me gives me a great SFR. And I think Trevor would probably agree with this, is using SFR as kind of your guiding light of picking exercises and exercise selection. I have yet, like we kind of both have agreed that a lot of the length and bias stuff generally does provide a better SFR. So it's like kind of checking the boxes of like that validated through research and through anecdotal, like these kind of stimulus proxies we have, like, okay, cool. Like maybe we should move forward with doing a little bit more of this. So yeah, I think that there's definitely, but then there's also other stuff where it's like reliably gives you a good stimulus. So it's like, why take it out of your program? Right.
Yeah, man. I love nerding out about that stuff. It's like with the little in-depth details. They're so fascinating. On the gym subject, this gym I've been going to, I wish I could record more because it has like some of the best equipment, like honestly pretty similar to what you're rocking with. But I don't know, like nobody records there. So like I do record every once in a while, but like not as much because like it's actually some big motherfuckers that like compete, like they are about it. Just a culture of like not recording, which is kind of nice, to be honest. Not the most productive for the content, but for my own training, it's honestly really nice.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's some value in having an environment that's free of that. I think that there's also value in doing it regardless, right? Like I think,
Oh, I do.
That's the thing. Yeah, I know. I think that's the thing that was also tough because like there are still gyms that are kind of anti-recording and stuff like that, which I think is kind of ridiculous in today's day and age. It's like free advertisement, and I think big part of the reason why my gym's grown to the popularity it has, right?
Bro, I'll just be shameless in that gym. Like the one natty dude, 6'2", not the most, but I'll be out there pushing record, man. You just got to push record sometimes.
Well, yeah, no, 100%. I mean, I talk to clients about this a lot because like I am very much adamant about like when a client comes to me, they need to record their sessions, and a lot of them aren't used to doing that, right? But like I in my mind, I go through like so if I had when I was more insecure about this, and sometimes I still do, is sorry, my dog's squeaking his toy.
No, you're good.
I go through like the logic of like what someone would say to you if you were like recording, and then the reasons why I'm recording. Let me see if I can remember kind of what I've gone through in my head. Like one is like, okay, for example, someone comes up to you and they're like, "What are you doing?" And it's like, "Well, I'm recording my set." And it's like, "Okay, why are you doing that?" It's like, "Okay, well, I'm doing this because in my mind, okay, so like I post these things so I can review my technique so that I can improve my technique and improve my results, and potentially reduce injury risk too, right? In my case, I also post content so that content helps other people as a result, helps other people to train better. And I don't know. I think that there's still like a culture of like negativity of like it being vain or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
There's also just the documentation's sake. It's something you can look back on. You know, as long as you're not in somebody's way and not like purposely recording other people or purposely putting your shit in the place of other people, I think that it's a totally normal thing and is becoming a more socially acceptable and kind of where our lives are evolving to. It's also funny when you see people talking down about it, because like the people who talk down about it are the same people recording their shit in the gym or having someone else record. There's like Mike Van Wyck had posted a video of him like kicking over a tripod, and I'm like, who the fuck recorded that? Like, there's someone recording that, or your camera's on a tripod recording you kicking a tripod. Like the
I used to think Mike Van Wyck was just a grumpy ass old man, and I just couldn't do it. I'm like, you are such a fucking boomer. But then, like, after like listening to him more on Bro Chat, I actually do like him. And,
no, I mean,
I've picked up a couple little cues to keep in mind. You know, he has some interesting thoughts.
So, no, yeah, it was just that in particular. I was like, dude, what are you doing? Like, so yeah, I think it's kind of silly, but I think that I don't know, the people who have a problem with it are the same kind of people who are very like hardcore, don't use your phone. I think I had a video about this. It's like, you know, it makes no difference if I in between sets press record and then record my set.
Yeah,
you know, and I maybe it's just an assumption that I'm like training for the camera or whatever. I'm just literally doing what I would normally do, just with the camera on.
And if people can't pick that up, like, don't get me wrong, there's like a certain few like influencers that are like at my gym, like influencers that are at my gym that are a little obnoxious about it, and I'm like, I kind of get the vibe that you are just doing, and that's fine, you know, you're paying money too.
They're for sure,
that's fine, but it is just like, can you be a little bit more considerate of like people that
100%?
Yeah.
Being just generally respectful, like that's just the main thing. It's like, try to be out of people's way. Like, people will stop and like, like ask if it's okay to walk through, and I'm like, yeah, of course. Like, you take priority. Like, you're here training. Like, you know, so people like walk. I mean, I appreciate when people like walk around or whatever, but like, I don't care if they walk through my frame. Like, I'm the one recording. I'm the one doing this in this environment. So just being generally courteous, being out of people's way generally.
The funniest shit is when like somebody will just be like minding their business, walking, they see that you have like a recording setup, and then they just fucking like on a dime, they like Matrix, they stop, they're like, oh, I didn't get in the frame, they're like, I'm good. And I'm like, bro, like mid-set, I'm like, it's all good, dude, like just keep going. Like,
yeah. I mean, I definitely appreciate that. Like, it's nice of you to do, but yeah, like for sure, like if I'm ever recording the gym, fucking walk through. I don't care. Like, I'm the one who's kind of out of place here doing it. But yeah, I mean, if you check those boxes, like if you're not being a dickhole, I mean, it is funny because like some of these influencers are making a fucking living off of this. You know what I mean? So it's like,
yeah,
I don't know. It's kind of funny.
I had one guy at a gym that I was training at in India like a while back, and you could tell like he just like wasn't down with the camera, and I was like doing the whole ass camera at the time, and like one time he was just saying some crazy off color shit, and like in front of the girl I was with at the time too. And I was like, okay, dude, like this has gotten to the point where like we have to fucking talk about it. Like the fact that you talk this much shit because I record is nuts. And like I've never done anything to you. So like what's the deal? And he was like, well, why do you do it? I was like, I mean, I do it because like I like helping other people, documenting it, and I make money doing this too. So like this is partially for what I do for a job. And then he told me, he's like, yeah, like I do cyber. Like later, we kind of had to hash it out a bit. And then he told me like, yeah, I do cybersecurity. I hate my job. I'm like, motherfucker, you like hate your job. And I'm just trying to, I'm like, out here to do something I love and get paid for it. Like
100%. I mean, like there's definitely days where I'm like, I'll train. But as a part of that, there's work involved. Like I'm recording, and like sometimes after a session I might sit down and do a couple of videos, you know, try to stay out of people's way and whatnot. But it is for sure work, and it is also like, you know, it is something like again, if you were to talk that through with someone, they're like, well, why do you do this? It's like, well, like I'm not, I mean, it's one, it's cool to document our progress, and two, this is just overall to help other people and put information out. It's like, you know, if you really have a problem with that, like you got something else. Like there's an issue with you, not the person recording. I think in general, if you have a problem with someone doing it, it's more of an issue of you, especially if they're not in the way or bothering other people. It's more of like a reflection of your insecurities than it is of the person recording.
Definitely, dude. Definitely. Well, Dude, we've been on for over an hour. We didn't really hit any of what I was thinking we hit, but I feel like that was still such a good podcast. Like we got into some really, really good stuff there.
Did you want to ask me like one thing, like real quick about like prep or anything like that? I mean, I don't mind.
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
Sorry, I kind of ranted on some of those.
No, it was good. It was good information. Let's because I'm sure I'll have you back for a fourth part within the somewhat near future. What's the prep goals, the 2024 goals in general? Tell us before we sign off and let the people know what's to come.
Yeah. I have the like same rough outline of doing the same show run I did back in 2022. I've talked about this on your podcast, but for those of you who don't know, I that was my first show in 8 years, and I won the overall at my first show, and then I got 8th at the USA's at a national show. So the goal is to go to nationals again, and so I got to requalify because it's been some time since I competed. Requalify, and then go to a national show again. I might do the same show run, but the thing I want to improve on the most is prep is being in better condition, the best condition that I can be when I step on stage. So I actually started much leaner. And if you did watch that video, David, you did, of me explaining my kind of prep outline, I started leaner. I'm starting with a little bit more farm than I normally do. So I might be ready earlier. So we'll see. But really, I'm not actually picking an actual show until I'm like within striking distance of competition conditioning. So like maybe a month out or something like that, just to ensure that I'm not working toward a deadline. I still have a deadline in my mind, but not that I'm more working towards the outcome of being in shape than I am of just getting on a stage. Because my goal is to be the best I can be on stage, not to work to a specific. And the thing is like I have timelines kind of in my head, and I can refine those over time. But because I've competed so few times, I would advise the same thing to a client who's coming to me for the first time for a prep, or we've only done a few shows together. Is generally like kind of let the show date come to you, and then as you refine that process, we know exactly where you need to be at the start of prep. You can start to kind of pick dates, especially when you're obviously coming up in the ranks as a competitor. But yeah, so I just have kind of like a rough outline, and then just kind of let the shows come to me. I know for sure I'll be ready by those summer show dates, but there's also the idea that like the prep is so long that I might actually need to I might need some time in between to kind of reduce the fatigue, reduce the drug load for a little bit, for health purposes as well. So because 6 months at high doses is a lot, for sure, especially with the drugs that need to be run in contest prep. So anyway, yeah, long story short, it's just I'm gonna let the show come to me and requalify, and then try to get closer and closer to a pro card.
Get that pro card on the national stage. I can see it. Yeah. That'd be sweet. That'd be super sick.
Definitely made a lot of improvements from last season to this season. So that with I think conditioning and my general structure. Obviously, I can't say how well I'm going to do. I have no idea who will show up, but I definitely will do better for sure than I did last time, and that's really what's most important.
Yeah. Dude, I'm looking forward to it. It's always cool to see too, just because like I know when you say you're going to do it, you're going to do it to the nth degree, and it's just so cool to see that in practice and see it play out.
Yeah. I'm going to try to document this one a little more too, because I do realize like I am very systematized about how I approach prep, and I think people get value out of that. I mean, that video did super well. I got a lot of positive feedback on it, so I'll try to document it a little bit more, talk a little bit about my processes of getting there and stuff. So that'll be really fun to do too.
Yeah, man. Well, we wish you luck from the Trainer Scoop to Dylan. Dude, thanks, it's gonna go great. Like I said, I have trying this new streaming platform, so let's see if this works. Go ahead and follow Dylan. That's the right handle, right? I really should have. Okay.
That's cool.
Yeah, so I can kind of like have things fade in.
And we can do a thumbs up.
We can do a thumbs up. So the podcast is up and Dylan is up as he gets ready for this competitive season, man. But as always, dude, it's always just good to touch base with you.
Likewise.
Hear your ideas, and share it with the people too. So I appreciate you taking the time to come on. And
thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, dude. Definitely. I'm sure I'll keep hitting your DMs with questions in the near future, as I typically do. Appreciate you coming on the podcast. Hope you have a great night. Thank you all for listening. Anything else that you need to plug, promote before we sign off?
Actually, I haven't said this publicly anywhere, but I'm starting a group with a few other coaches. It's going to be released at the end of this month.
Oh,
Yeah. So it's called Quantum Physiques. It's going to be an educational platform group where we will have free training templates. We will have basically a group where you can submit your technique and get reviews. We also have a place where you can answer or ask questions and get them answered by myself and other vetted coaches. We'll also have free courses. We'll have beginner, intermediate, and advanced level courses that you can work through. And the group will actually be entirely free for a period of time. We're not sure how long it'll be free for. So yeah, if that's something you're interested in, check out Quantum Physiques on Instagram. It's a little QP purple logo with a little atom sign in the middle. And we'll be releasing some stuff over the next week or two about how to join the group, how to get signed up, and all that stuff. So yeah, that's something that we're working on as well, and that'll be really cool.
dude, this is super exciting. Who knew that we were going to get this treat on the Trainer Scoop, the official announcement?
Yeah, right.
Oh,
I haven't said it to anybody else, so
yeah, I'll have to chop that up a little bit and send you some clips because that sounds really cool, man. I'm gonna check it out. I hope everybody listening here checks it out because if it's free, you might as well check it out while it's free. That's crazy.
It's literally a free resource for basically like people who are not ready to make the jump for coaching just yet, but want to learn some of the stuff that I have to put out in some of these coaches as well, and just have questions and stuff. Well, it's just a free resource that you can use for that.
Yeah, that's gonna be sick, man. Thanks for plugging that. Please go ahead, check it out. Do all the YouTube things as well, my loyal audience, all the Spotify things and Apple podcast things, liking, rating, commenting, subscribing, thumbs up, no, okay, now just
not gonna work now.
Now when we needed it most, it fails us.
Come on.
All the social media things. We appreciate you guys for listening. We'll catch you in the next episode.